Good evening, Canterbury. Welcome to NewsMakers, where we debate the issues that shaped the week. It's a pleasure to introduce this week's panel. Orion Chief Executive and Chairman of ECA, Roger Sutton. The wise and worldly scribe, journalist and writer, Bruce Ansley. And from the Court Theatre, Artistic Director, a man who loves those flat whites, Mr. Ross Gumbley. Thank you very much for joining us. I should point out, by the way, in the interests of transparency, that the views to be expressed here by Mr. Sutton are the views of Mr. Sutton and not the companies he works for. We are going to begin with the government's controversial scoping of the conservation estate for mining potential. If you've been wondering why conservationists have been turning a sickly shade of green in the past week or so, this is probably why. Do you think it's worth an exploratory mission? Ross?
Well, I think they're turning green because they're all vegetarian, clearly. I don't know. I mean, it's a slippery slope, isn't it? I mean, there could be precedents to be set here. I think we have to be very discreet. I think we're in danger of our reputation internationally, which could reflect on tourism. But I mean, I don't think there's any problem in scoping it, but I just think they need to be discreet in the way that they're going to approach this and spin it.
Can mining be discreet in a conservation estate, Bruce?
Well, there's no evidence of that, is there? They didn't, despite all the talk of new mining techniques, which are supposed to be non-invasive, they still look like bomb sites to me. Wherever they are in this country, they look terrible. The mountains carved apart all down the west coast, and there's holes dug. I can't see how you can go into a national park and do it discreetly.
Even if they try their best to be somewhat discreet, are you against it, or do you think there should be some slack?
I'm certainly against it. Well, for two reasons. No, partly because of the invasion of national parks, and secondly, because a lot of, I wonder how many of those, however many billions of dollars of resources we've got in those parks, I think a large part of them is actually lignite. And so, here we are, we've got an issue going on here with carbon credits and how we should control our own emissions. And we're going to import this low-grade coal for people like China, probably mainly China, to burn, thus adding to the greenhouse gas problem considerably, I think.
All right. Roger, how do you see it?
I'm not as black and white as maybe some of the other panellists are.
Green and white, aren't we?
Well, green and white, or green and black then, if you like.
Or just green.
Well, or just green. I mean, look, I love spending time in the mountains and so on. So I'm the first guy that would actually, in some areas, would be, taking my tent and taking time off work to go and fight for it. But we also have to be realistic. There may be some mining techniques in some places that will actually be worthwhile. The reality is, New Zealand, we do need to make some money to pay our bills to do all the things we want to do. So we need to be really careful by just saying a blanket no. And I guess I'll just happily point out that I should think the threatened species budget of DOC is probably about a tenth of what any of the oil companies spend on marketing in this country each year. So I find it hard to believe we can be a rich and prosperous country and look after the environment at the same time. And maybe if we are going to be rich and prosperous, we are going to have to do some very careful mining in one or two carefully selected areas. But we'd want to be really, really careful at doing it. But I'm not a black and green sort of a guy.
All right. Can I just test a few claims from Jerry Brownlee with you good people? First of all, the Energy and Resources Minister claims Australia's superior living standard is largely due to the mineral wealth. And he reckons one of the great misnomers is that New Zealand doesn't have that resource. We do, and we don't tap it, is Brownlee's argument. Is it quite a strong, compelling argument? If we are to,
he's been practicing it a lot, so it's probably getting more compelling.
I don't know. I have yet to see
unlock it. I have yet to see this much touted audit of resources in the national parks anyway. I mean, has it been made public? Who did it? Or was it just a stab in the dark? If it's all underneath the ground, are we so certain that there are all these billions of dollars worth of stuff there?
I mean, there are some places where we are seeing some mining going on at the moment that does actually look not too bad. The guys at Pike River have drilled a hole, and I think it's under conservation land at the moment, to take out some very high quality coal, which isn't actually going to be burned in power stations. It's really going to be a fuel for steel making. So, there are some examples out there. So I think understand.
One example, sorry.
There is you're right, and there are lots of examples of awful mining. But I think we just need to be careful that if we are going to get richer, if these minerals are genuinely there and they're genuinely worth a lot of money, I don't dismiss it. I'd like to have an open mind about these sorts of things.
Okay, Ross?
An open mind, if not an open mind. I think you can't compare Australia and New Zealand, you know, because let's face it, digging an open cast mine in the middle of Australia is only going to improve the look of that landscape. I mean, you're not going to notice it, are you? So it's. I think we've got a much more fragile infrastructure. Environment.
All right. Just last question on mining with respect to can the environmental considerations find a happy hunting ground with the miners? Jerry Brownie cites the snails and Stockton as a classic example of coexistence, where the snails were moved so they could mine Stockton. Is this a stunning example?
Well, I don't think so, because it depends who you ask about this, doesn't it? I mean, nobody's asked the snails.
No.
But there is some evidence that the snails actually haven't got on that well when they've been shifted. So, I mean, I think I think I'm on the borderline on this one.
All right.
It's not quite black and white for me. But I do think if you're going to start tampering with the environment, it's very naive to believe that, you know, you can just shift it down the road.
Sure. All right. Just a quick issue before we go to the break. The public display of gang patches. Should they be banned? Well, of course, Wanganui has led the charge, and Timaru is sizing this one up too. Whether you love or loathe Mayor Michael Laws, do you think he deserves some credit, or is he the champion of nonsense? Mr. Sutton.
I think it's a pretty irrelevant sort of an issue. I think in 6 months' time, people will be talking about whether gang violence has gone up or down in Wanganui and blaming it on the patch issue. And I just think it's just largely irrelevant. It's just a pity we put so much effort into talking about such minor trivia.
Mr. Ansley.
Well, I agree with Roger, actually, totally. I think it's got much more to do with Michael Laws than it has about anything else. He's got his constituents at home who seem to like the redneck approach, and he's got his audience for his radio live show.
Indeed.
He's got to stay what the papers like to call a controversial figure.
And interestingly, the radio rating survey period started this week. Funny timing, isn't it? Funny timing. And then he upset the children in Otaki as well. Yeah, double blow.
Otaki.
Yes, Otaki, yes, and there's no H in that one. Ross?
I agree with these two fine gentlemen. You know, I mean, it seems to be a strange thing when you make this the issue. What are you saying? It's okay to be in a gang, but you can't actually advertise. You know, I mean, isn't that the issue? I mean, the fact that we have groups of people breaking the law would seem to be more important than the fact that they're advertising the fact that they belong to those gangs.
Although, to play Michael's Law's devil's advocate, if you have a group of swaggering gang members sporting their patches on the prowl in public, arguably that is highly intimidatory, right? So if you take away the patches, is that a wee bit like neutering a dog?
The mongrel mob?
Oh, they'll still be scary guys, whether they're wearing patches or no patches. They'll be scary guys. And that issue of the fact we produce these dysfunctional people into society needs to be tackled.
That's
just
the
tackling
issue.
That's really the issue, and it's all. We think we've solved it by not wearing their patches.
Yeah.
Nah,
It's an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, surely.
All right.
not even that.
Not even that? All right. We'll take a break. Coming up, we've got other issues to look at, including toys and guns. Do they sit well together at a shopping block? And other issues. Do stay with us.